in Adobe Illustrator, we're going to learn two things. First, we're going to learn about layers. After that, we're going to learn about using the pen tool. They kind of go hand in hand, so I wanted to do both in conjunction with each other today. So first thing you need to do is to start a new document. What's the key command? Control N, and let's call this one layers. Layers. Your orientation doesn't matter. And go ahead and click OK. The windows that we're going to be using are going to be the shape tool. So if you want to tear that one off, hold down the shape, the last little tear off, click on that, tear your shapes off. We're going to be using window layers. You're going to need that tab. We're also going to be using window stroke. And finally, window swatches, I think we'll use a little bit. So if you have other windows open, go ahead and minimize them, send them back to the dock. Give yourself as much space and as room as you can today. Window layers, stroke, and swatches. Okay. Anybody ever trace a picture using tracing paper before? Anybody? Yeah? Okay, so when you trace a picture using tracing paper, what are the steps required in order to trace that picture properly? Okay, so you got your original picture and you placed it on a table, right? And then you take a piece of tracing paper and you put it on top, okay? Now, what would happen if you were tracing and in the middle of your trace, your little sister came in and she moved the original character or whatever you were trying to draw? What would you then have to try to do? Right, you would have to match the original picture with the tracing that you made. And a lot of times it wasn't exact, right? And so your character or whatever you were tracing came out looking crooked or looking messed up in a part. Well, if you use a piece of tape, you could tape down your picture. That way it won't move easily, right? And so Illustrator has a lot of those same features using layers. So if you haven't already, again, go to Window, Layers. So right now what you're looking at then in Window Layers is you're looking at a piece of invisible tracing paper. Okay, so here where it says layer 1, and when we draw and we put objects on our page, everything is going to be placed on layer 1. Okay, but we can put new layers into this document, and we're going to do that in just a few seconds, so we can have different objects on different layers, and that'll let us do some really cool stuff. So first, while we're still on layer 1, let's go ahead and make an object that has fills but no stroke. Take off your stroke. Make 3 different objects. Make a circle, square, and star. Change the color after you make all 3, and it'll be a lot easier for you. And you don't need strokes on these objects. If you take a close look at your layers window, you'll see right next to layer 1 now, that's not a white square, but it actually shows you a little icon of what's on that particular layer. You guys see that? Now, if you double click where it says layer 1, it's going to bring up a new window. And in this new window, first thing we're going to do, instead of calling it layer 1, is we're just going to call it shapes. Now, before you click OK, let's quickly run through these. The color is light blue. You don't have to change this, but in case you want to, you can always associate a color with the layer. I like to just leave it alone because whenever you make a new layer, Illustrator always assigns a new color to that layer. So you don't have to mess with that at all. The one that we're going to use today is this lock feature. And that's similar to when you use masking tape or tape to tape down your original picture. You can lock down a layer. You can lock down a single layer at a time. Print, we'll sometimes use that one later on. You don't have to print every layer. So if you don't want something printed, you can uncheck that button. Show, we're going to do that in just a few seconds. And one that we're going to use later on this week is this one here that says dim images. So that'll dim whatever on that layer. It'll make it so that you can see other stuff on top of it easier. So pretty soon you guys are going to be tracing characters, tracing pictures and stuff like that. Remember the picture of Cat Williams that I showed you that the kid did? That's how he did it. He dimmed the original to 50%, then you trace on top of it. Okay, but you don't have to check that right now, but go ahead and click OK. So now it renamed our layer to shapes. So take a look up at the screen. The very first the very first button down here at the bottom of that window is the trash can. You can always delete a layer, but you need to have at least one layer in your document in order to delete it. All right, we're going to be doing that in just a few minutes. The next one is the one you're going to really use a lot, and that's the create a new layer button. Go ahead and click that. So when you put it in, it just calls it layer 2. Now, I tell students this every year, and the ones that do well in Illustrator, listen to me. The ones that don't do well in Illustrator, don't listen to me. If you want to get a good grade in this class, get into the habit of naming your layers. We're going to use layers not just in Illustrator, but when we get to Photoshop, when we get to Flash, Dreamweaver, whatever, you're going to want to use layers. And especially like in Photoshop, you're going to have like 50, 60, 70, some people have hundreds of different layers. So you have to name them, okay? So get into the habit of naming your layers, and we're going to do that in just a few minutes. Those are the two that you're going to use in this class. We're not going to use these other two in this class. If you go on to take a college Illustrator course, you might run into those, okay? All right, now, these little eyeball symbols, that's your toggles visibility, all right? That shows or hides whatever's on that layer. So click on that eyeball for our shapes layer. So that little eyeball then will hide whatever's on that layer. So again, that's a good way if you're tracing something and you don't want to look at it, there it is. The next one, that empty space right next to the eyeball, that's the lock button. When you click there, then you'll lock everything that's on that layer. So if you click on there and now try to move your objects with the black arrow, it won't let you touch it, won't let you move it. Okay? So again, if you want to keep something in place and you don't want to move it, there it is. But again, you just got to realize that if ever you can't move something, it's probably because it's locked. It's on a locked layer. Okay? So go ahead and unlock the layer. And now, click on one of your objects and take a look up at the screen because it's kind of hard to see. You guys see that blue square that popped up right here? Okay. That's your selector button. That selector button will allow you to move objects from one layer to the next. So if you click on an object, that'll pop up. Or if more than one object is selected. So if I hold down Shift and click on two objects, I can move two objects to another layer. But what I want you guys to do is just to move one of your objects to layer 2. So click and drag it up to layer 2 and let go. And now take a look at your icons. You'll see it shows you got things on 2 different layers. So I put an orange circle, so I'm going to name mine orange circle, but name your layer whatever it is that you moved up to that new layer. So double click, I'm going to call mine orange circle. So now when I move that around, you'll notice that my orange circle is now on top. You guys see that? Before, it was behind everything else. And the reason being is because that orange circle layer is on top of my shape layer. So whatever is on top in your layers window is going to be on top here in your document. And sometimes students get confused. Here's how they get confused. Because earlier this week we learned about right-clicking, going down to arrange, bring forward, send to back, right? But if I send backwards or send to back, it doesn't go anywhere. And students are like, teacher, my circle won't send to back. And I have to come around and I have to hold their hand and I have to pat them on the back. And I said, now, student, don't cry. Okay, but your circle is on that top layer. But check it out. I can move layers around. But you got to be careful when you do this. This isn't for the weak at heart. You got to be strong-minded in order to do this. When you click, you can drag that layer down, but you got to make sure you're not doing this. Take a look up at the screen. You see those two black triangles on the side? If you see that, that means you haven't gone down far enough. You want to drag down until you see those little triangles underneath. That lets you know that you're actually moving that layer underneath it. If you get those two black triangles on the side, if you make a mistake and you do that, it's actually going to merge those layers together, and you don't want to do that ever. Okay? So make sure when you move these layers around that you're not merging them onto one another. You're actually moving them underneath or in between one another. So if you notice now, when I move my orange circle behind, it's now behind in my document as well. And if I toggle my visibility for my shapes, you can see that. Everybody cool? Yeah. Yep. All right. So now what I want you to do is to separate all three of your shapes onto three different layers and make sure you name them appropriately. So I'm going to call mine blue star. And my original shapes layer, I got a green square, so I'm going to name it green square. You're really going to use layers a lot, especially when you start tracing. Okay, we all good? All right. Now, check it out. Let's say I no longer want this blue star here, and I delete it. Okay? I deleted it from my document, and it's no longer there. But take a look at my layers. What's still there? The layer's still there. So if I put a yellow star on that layer, it's not going to change the name.